My sister Bianca didn't just thank me at her wedding reception. She executed me, standing in the humid, suffocating air of the glass conservatory at Lake Geneva. She took the microphone and smiled. "I have a special gift for my big sister," she announced, her voice dripping with poison. "Since you always dress like you're attending a funeral, I thought you could use a little help." She handed me an envelope in front of 300 VIPs. Inside wasn't a thank you note. It was a coupon for plastic surgery. Because honestly, Octavia, you're the family trash collector. You might as well look the part. The wealthy crowd didn't gasp. They laughed. And in that moment, staring at their expensive teeth, I realized this wasn't a joke. It was a declaration of war. Before I tell you what I handed her in return, and how it cost her everything she thought she owned, drop a comment. Where are you watching from? And what time is it for you right now? I want to see how far this story travels. I didn't cry. I didn't run. I didn't give them the satisfaction of a single trembling lip. Instead, I reached out and took the microphone from my sister's hand. Her smile faltered for a fraction of a second. Just a glitch in her perfect performance, before she smoothed it back into that mask of pitying superiority. "Thank you for the feedback, Bianca," I said. My voice was calm, terrifyingly calm. It echoed through the conservatory, bouncing off the glass walls that held in the humid, orchid-scented air. "I'll take it under advisement." I handed the microphone back to her, turned on my heel, and walked off the stage. The silence that followed was heavy, wet, and uncomfortable. I could feel 300 pairs of eyes drilling into my back. As I walked down the center aisle, passing tables of tech moguls and old money socialites, I analyzed the sound I had heard moments ago. That laughter. It hadn't been genuine amusement. It was something else entirely. It was the theater of cruelty. I realized then that they weren't laughing because Bianca was funny. They were laughing because it was a ritual. In this world, this suffocating bubble of Lake Geneva, wealth cruelty is the price of admission. By laughing at the outsider, they were signaling their loyalty to the queen. They were cementing their status in the in-group by helping to destroy the scapegoat. It was a social blood sport, and I was the sacrifice on the altar of Bianca's ego. Understanding that didn't make it hurt less, but it made the pain useful. It turned my humiliation into data, and I knew exactly how to use it. I didn't stop at my table. I walked straight out of the reception hall, past the open bar, and into the bridal suite where I'd stashed my gear. The room was chaos, discarded makeup wipes, empty champagne bottles, the carnage of preparing perfection. I sat down at the vanity and opened my laptop. My hands were steady. I connected to the estate's Wi-Fi and logged into the family's private server. For 5 years, I hadn't just been a sister, I had been the shadow CEO of Brand Bianca. I was the one who managed the servers, the one who scrubbed the digital footprints, the one who kept the skeletons in the closet from rattling too loudly. I navigated to the folder labeled Crisis Management. Inside were subfolders that told the real history of this family. Bianca, DUI, 2021. Gary, Audit Defense. Brenda, Settlement Agreements. Files that contained the NDAs I'd negotiated, the press releases I'd written to bury scandals, the receipts for the silence I'd bought. I didn't delete them. Deletion is emotional. Deletion is messy. Instead, I selected everything. I right-clicked and chose Encrypt. A dialog box popped up asking for a password. I typed it in slowly, savoring every keystroke. PAYMENT. I hit enter. A green progress bar raced across the screen. Within 10 seconds, 5 years of protective labor were locked behind a cryptographic wall that not even Preston, the tech genius sitting in the other room, could break without the key. I wasn't just leaving the wedding. I was turning off the life support. I closed the laptop. The screen went black, reflecting my own face. I didn't look like a victim. I looked like someone who had just balanced the books. I stood up, grabbed my bag, and walked out the side door into the cool Wisconsin air. I was done being the fixer. Now, I was just the witness. I drove until the lights of the estate were nothing but a blurred smudge in my rearview mirror. I pulled over at the blackened overlook above Lake Geneva, killing the engine. The silence here was different. It wasn't the suffocating silence of the conservatory. It was the silence of a vault closing. I sat in the dark, my hand resting on the dashboard next to the plastic surgery coupon Bianca had given me. I didn't rip it up. I needed it. It was the final receipt in a transaction that had lasted 29 years. I call it the ledger of ghosts. For most of my life, I believed that love was a currency I had to earn. I thought if I worked hard enough, if I fixed enough problems, if I buried enough bodies, my parents would finally look at me the way they looked at Bianca. So I kept a tally, not on paper, but in the marrow of my bones. I looked out at the water and let the numbers scroll through my mind. $12,000. That was the cost of the specialized PR firm I hired at 3 a.m. when Bianca got that DUI in her sophomore year. I didn't just pay the bill. I scrubbed the internet. I made sure the mugshot never saw the light of day. My parents slept through the night while I negotiated with editors to kill the story. $8,000. That was the cash settlement I paid out of my own pocket to the former housekeeper Bianca had thrown a vase at during a tantrum. I drafted the NDA myself. I convinced the woman not to press charges. I told my parents it was a misunderstanding, so they wouldn't have to face the reality that their golden child was violent. And then there were the unquantifiable costs. The college essays I wrote while Bianca was out partying. The strategic business plans I drafted that she presented as her own to get her job as brand director. The family myth was simple. Bianca was the genius, the star, the supernova. I was just the satellite, lucky to be caught in her gravity. Gary and Brenda believed it because they wanted to. They needed Bianca to be perfect because she was the projection of their ego. I was just the mechanic who kept the engine running, covered in grease, invisible until something broke. I picked up the coupon from the dashboard. They thought I was the failure because I lived in a studio apartment and drove a 4-year-old sedan. They didn't know I lived like that because I was funneling 60% of my income into a restitution fund to cover the holes Bianca burned in the family finances. I was eating ramen so they could eat caviar. But tonight, the ledger was balanced by roasting me, by handing me this piece of paper in front of the people I had protected her from. Bianca had declared bankruptcy on our relationship. She had defaulted on the debt of sisterhood. I rolled down the window. The lake air was cold and clean. I realized then that I wasn't the sidekick. I wasn't the help. I was the architect. I was the only thing standing between the royal family of Lake Geneva and the absolute ruin they had been courting for a decade. And tonight, the architect had just quit. I tossed the coupon out the window. It fluttered into the darkness, disappearing into the ravine below. I put the car in drive. I wasn't going back to my apartment to cry. I was going home to prepare for the fallout. Because when you remove the foundation, the house doesn't just settle, it collapses. The sun rose over the lake, but it brought no warmth. I woke up in my childhood bedroom, the small, drafty one at the back of the estate that used to be a sewing room, and reached for my phone. Part of me, the part that was still a naive little girl, expected an apology. I expected a text saying, "We went too far," or, "Are you okay?" Instead, I found an assault. The first text was from Bianca. "You completely ruined the vibe last night. Everyone is asking why you looked so sour. Do you have any idea how embarrassing it is to have a sister who can't take a joke? Fix this." I stared at the screen. Ruined the vibe. Not I publicly humiliated you, but your reaction to my cruelty was inconvenient. Then my phone rang. It was my mother. "Brenda," I answered. Not because I wanted to talk, but because I needed to hear the pitch of her voice. I needed to know exactly what I was dealing with. "Octavia," she said. Her tone wasn't apologetic. It was brisk, efficient. The voice she used when ordering caterers. "We need to handle this situation before it spirals." "I agree," I said, my voice raspy with sleep. "I think an apology would be a good start." She sighed. A long, exasperated sound that scraped against my nerves. "Oh, stop it. You're being dramatic. It was a roast." "Octavia, it's a tradition. Everyone laughs at weddings. You've always been too sensitive. Too serious. That's why you don't fit in." There it was. The gaslighting. She was rewriting history in real time, turning a public execution into a misunderstanding caused by my lack of humor. "Whatever you say." "Mom, look," she continued, pivoting to the real reason she called. "Bianca is devastated. She feels like you abandoned her on her big day. We need a gesture. A grand gesture to show that we are a united front." "A gesture," I repeated. "Yes. Your father and I have been talking. Since you're so disconnected from the family lifestyle, and since you don't really use the estate anyway, we think it's time you signed over your share of the Lake Geneva house to Bianca. As a wedding gift, a peace offering." The room spun. They wanted the house. My grandmother had left the estate to Bianca and me. 50-50. It was the only asset I had to my name. The only thing they hadn't controlled. And now, 12 hours after roasting me, they were demanding I surrender it as an apology for being roasted. "You want me to give her my inheritance," I said flatly, "because she insulted me." "We want you to prove you're part of this family." Brenda's voice rose, sharp and shrill. "If you don't do this, Octavia, if you choose your ego over your sister's happiness, then you are choosing to walk away from us entirely. We won't support someone who undermines this family. You sign those papers, or you're out. Completely." It was an ultimatum, a shakedown. I closed my eyes. For years, I had held on to a shred of guilt, a belief that if I just tried harder, they would love me. But in that moment, listening to my mother demand my property as tribute for her golden child, the guilt evaporated. It didn't fade. It vanished. "Okay," I said. The word was a whisper, but it was the heaviest thing I'd ever carried. "Okay," she asked, surprised by the sudden capitulation. "I hear you." "Mom, I understand exactly what needs to happen. I'll handle it." I hung up before she could say another word. I didn't feel sad. I didn't feel angry. I felt light. They wanted a gesture. Fine. I would give them a gesture. But first, I had a meeting to attend. And this time, I wasn't going as the daughter. I was going as the fixer. The elevator to the 42nd floor of the Titan Tech Tower was silent. Smooth. And fast. It felt like being launched into orbit. I adjusted my blazer, checking my reflection in the polished steel doors. I looked professional. I looked calm. I looked like a woman about to fire herself. I walked into Preston's office. It was a glass box suspended over the city. Sterile and terrifyingly transparent. Preston was standing by the window, looking out at the sprawling grid of Chicago. He didn't turn around when I entered. "I'm resigning," I said plainly. "My family situation is turning volatile, and I won't let it contaminate this firm." Preston didn't argue. He slid a black folder across his desk. "Sit. Open it." Inside was a bank transfer receipt, $250. 000. Sent 2 years earlier from my personal account to the company's charity fund. "I know Bianca stole it," Preston said calmly. "I know she spent it on her lifestyle. And I know you drained your savings, liquidated your 401k, and quietly paid it back to protect her." He looked at me. "Why bankrupt yourself for someone who despises you?" "It wasn't love," I said. "It was ransom. My parents had made it clear if Bianca went down, the family would collapse, and they blamed me for being capable enough to fix it. I wasn't saving her. I was buying their survival. I was a hostage," I said. Preston closed the folder. "Good. Because I don't need a martyr. I need a partner. Keep the file. It's evidence." I didn't resign. I went to war. I drove straight to the county records office. My parents had been desperate for me to sign away my share of the Lake Geneva estate. The urgency felt wrong. The files told the truth. The house wasn't paid off. It was buried 3 mortgages deep, loaded with high-interest loans, and hit with a federal tax lien filed 48 hours earlier. Nearly $1 million owed to the IRS. The estate wasn't an inheritance. It was a grenade. Their plan was simple: strip my name from the deed so they could refinance again or dump it on Bianca and hope for a miracle. I drafted a quitclaim deed. If I signed it, I wasn't losing wealth. I was shedding liability. So I signed, notarized it, and drove to brunch. At the post-wedding brunch, my family greeted me like I'd come to surrender. Bianca, smug and white, barely skimmed the document before signing. "Congratulations," I said evenly. "You now own 100% of the Lake Geneva estate." She smirked. "Which means you also own 100% of its $3. $2 million debt, and the federal tax lien attached to it." Silence. Panic. Collapse. "I'm no longer an owner," I continued. "So when the IRS seizes the property next month, they'll be coming for you." I picked up my bag. I'm debt-free, asset-free, and finally, family-free. I walked out. On the highway, my phone buzzed. The restitution cleared. Preston texted, "The books are clean. Come by Monday. We need to discuss your equity package." Partner. My bank balance was nearly zero. I smiled. The most devastating revenge isn't destruction. It's withdrawal. I didn't ruin my family. I just stopped holding up the ceiling and let gravity finish the job.